Hello, everyone. We are live via LinkedIn and also YouTube. So I want to give some love to our YouTube subscribers as well. And today we got quite a very exciting topic. Marcelo Lopez is here with us today. Marcelo agreed to come on and have a live version of a very interesting conversation we had. So Marcelo and I had the opportunity to work on many engagements, and we've been coming up with challenges relating to tools more and more. And that has led us into creating solutions for our respective clients and to collaborate with each other on what this means for the Agile industry and for Agile transformations. And we thought, hey, let's try to this live. Let's try to bring individuals in to the conversation, take their questions, and so on. So welcome everyone. Today, we're going to do a deeper dive on effective tools and metrics. This is, of course, presented by Agile Genesis, and I'm your host, Ernesto. We have Marcelo as our guest, subject matter expert and speaker. So we're going to explore things like Jira, Azure, DevOps, Miro, Mural, and any other tools you might have in mind. We'll take your questions and we'll get into the key Agile practices that we have observed through some of our own experience and engagements. So Marcelo, you are an expert in Agile, an expert in Scrum, an expert in Kanban. I can go on and on and on and on. But rather than going through your extensive resume, tell us a little bit about your background and tell us a little bit about your journey in respect to tooling. And you've seen the change in the industry. You've seen it go from stickies all the way up to very elaborate tools such as the ones we're using today. So Marcelo, welcome. Please tell us a little more about that.
Wow, thank you. I really don't know where to start after an introduction like that, Ernesto. I want to say, first of all, thank you to you and Agile Genesis for having me on as a guest. This is a while coming. First of all, this kind of marks a milestone because like 2 weeks ago, 20 years ago, was my first foray into understanding this world of work that we do now called Agile. Okay. Bumped into a friend of mine, Mark Kilby, at a Microsoft Developer Days, and he told me about this thing called Scrum. Okay. I mean, I'd heard of extreme programming and stuff like that, but he told me about this thing called Scrum, and well, here I am 20 years later, to your original question. Yeah. I mean, I remember back in the day, working at IBM, our work week consisted of, we had some list of some things that came out of a system that, got copied onto 3x5 cards and a cork board with stick pins. And these are the things that we were planning on working on with our team. We met with our manager, okay, not a product owner in sight, and we talked about, okay, who could work on what with who, okay. Nobody was expected to work by themselves. It was all collaborative. I'm not going to say it was collective, but the idea was that we planned together, we worked together, we debugged together. We tested together. It was a soup to nuts kind of thing. And nowadays, we're still doing the same thing, except we're using all this variety of tools. Many of them, the ones that you mentioned, some of them that aren't even called what they used to be, because, for example, Azure DevOps that people would recognize was not originally called Azure DevOps. Okay, it's actually the grandchild of something called Visual Source Safe. Okay, same thing with Jira Agile. It was an extension called Greenhopper back in the
Microsoft even struggled with the branding of Azure DevOps. We just recently sort of oriented to calling it that, right? We actually have to name two things in order to get the name of that tool right. For a while, it was projects, and it was being confused with Microsoft projects, and Then it was Azure, but it was being confused with the Azure cloud
Ah,
implementation of Microsoft. It went through quite the branding journey
yeah.
just to arrive at the name. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If we want to round out the family of naming, before then it was called Visual Studio Team Server. Before that, it was called Team Foundation Server. And it's a progression over time, and every time that we've had these changes, our team members have, and by the way, they're stakeholders. They've been along for the ride. Okay, anytime you update a tool, the stakeholders are along for the ride, even if they think they're not, because the data's got to come from somewhere. So every time we've gone through these migrations and these evolutionary changes, everybody's in for a little bit of a bumpy ride. It's been a bit of a roller coaster in that sense.
Yeah, and just a fun fact for people watching, you might be familiar with Jira, and sometimes when folks write Jira, uh, we write it in all caps. And the name Jira actually originated from the name Godzilla, or the Japanese word Gojira, which I can't even pronounce.
Yeah.
It was the original iconic movie monster, Godzilla, right? And
Mhm.
Jira was just sort of this nickname now that was given to it, and the tool adopted it, and that's why we call it Jira. So it's an actual name; it's not an acronym. Just a little fun
Right.
fact there, connecting that to something we use every day.
Yeah, that's one of those little one of those little trivia things where you kind of had to have been there. And I guess when you're as old as I am, you kind of have been there, right? So you kind of have been there. And the thing is that that all these systems have what I'll call a love despise relationship. I'm not going to call it hate, but despise relationship with teams and management, and especially in the quote the age of agile. I mean, remember, think about it: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It's like the tools have gotten put all back of the bus. Many reasons behind all that. Okay. Because and this is still an issue today. All too often, the tool is used as an instrument of control over the developers, kind of hobbling the developers, the team members. And so, one of the things that you and I struggle is to help find that healthy balance with a tool that enables the individuals and interactions to flourish. In other words, don't let the tool get in the way of the people, but also make it sufficiently rich enough that it actually captures enough information that the teams and the stakeholders don't forget the decisions they made, why they made those decisions, the outcomes coming out of those decisions, progress towards goals, and things like that. See, a lot of times folks, focus overly on the squishy stuff, the people stuff, and forget, what? Some of this business stuff actually is very important because bills still have to get paid, right? So,
And I think that's important. I even put it in as a quote for comments, right? Don't let the tools get in the way of people communicating, because
mhm.
it addresses the elephant in the room, or should we say, the Godzilla in the room.
Yeah.
The idea that the Agile Manifesto is very clear about this idea of people first, right?
Mhm.
In it being over process and tools. It doesn't say we don't need those two things. It just
Right.
says that we need to communicate. We need to put the people in the interaction ahead of
Mhm.
that. So the tool becomes a way to allow us to do that, not the other way around, right? We're not communicating through the tool about the tool, but we're rather enhancing our communication through what the tool can do for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Think of the system that we're using right now to have this conversation over the internet and other tools like this. This is a tool, just like any other tool. This is a tool. And I won't mention the Z word, but everybody knows which Z word it is. Starts with Z, ends with M, has an ooh in the middle. Um, and where honestly, where would we be, especially during the pandemic, if not for tools like that? that allowed the communication to take place. Now, this is fine for having this conversation and interaction, but the fact is there are artifacts that our teams work with, and stickies or 3x5 cards on a cork board isn't going to cut it when we're possibly thousands of miles away from each other, right?
I mean, Marcelo, I went through the evolution of moving out of those physical things, getting past the stigma of the fact that we're going to do this digitally. What, we're not going to use stickies anymore?
Yeah.
That's not Agile. Well, nowhere in the Agile Manifesto or anywhere else, for those that are thumping through, does it say you need to use these
Yeah.
physical things. You just need to use what works for enhancing communication. The other point is this idea of face-to-face communication. And the question is, are you and I right now face to face? Are we having a face to face communication, right? Agile Manifesto 2001, at the time, that kind of communication, the way we're having it today, was a little more limited. Today, you can read my body language. I can see your face. You are hearing my voice. This is synchronous communication in a way that we would simulate if we were in a room. Now, to be very clear, I am not advocating that having a Zoom meeting, and I'll say the words, right? We're here about tools, so we'll mention the tool names. Having a Zoom meeting is better than two people in a room together interacting. There's just a lot more richness to experiencing the same environment that increases that for communication purposes. So that's better. But we're getting pretty darn good by making use of these tools. So let's touch on the first tip, right? One that I always, it's the low hanging fruit that I see a lot of people leaving on the table. Look, if you're going to use tools for remote communication, use the tool features. Zoom is about video conferencing. Turn on video. Allow yourself the opportunity to do that, whether it's a virtual background, whether it's in an area that feels more private so that you feel okay sharing that background. Nothing worse than talking to a blank screen when you're trying to collaborate with someone. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, especially working distributed, especially during the pandemic, people were feeling isolated. And here's the problem. If you turned off your video and kept your video off, guess what you were doing? You were self-isolating. So you're contributing to that issue, which doctors, psychologists were calling out as, hey, this is another symptom of the situation of we're in the middle of a pandemic. But we did it to ourselves by limiting that visual interaction with the other person. Okay. And so I explained that to teams that I was working with and saying, look, if you're feeling a little funky because you've been locked up or kept inside your home for a while, why do you want to isolate yourself further from someone who you already know pretty much because you've worked with them for a while? You got along well enough with them when you were in person. So why are you isolating yourself now all of a sudden? Okay. Barring internet issues, yes, there's connectivity issues, this and that. I could understand that 10 years ago. Okay. Oh, Ernesto's frozen. It's his internet connectivity. Okay, folks, barring certain situations, especially in more Western countries, I'll be respectful there. Okay. Internet stability has become more superfluous. Okay. It's become more and more accessible. Okay. And that's one of the things that I would say that if we were to go further, if an organization wants to use a remote workforce, you know what? Maybe that might be a benefit that you add into a benefits package, making your remote workers more accessible by contributing either a stipend or something to their ability to have better internet in their home. Okay. Or, for example, I heard of one company that collectively made an agreement with, I think, Musk's Starlink, so that employees of that company could get Starlink internet service for a corporate price, because that company valued the ability of the interactivity of the workers while they were remote from each other. Now, I don't know if they're still using it that way. Okay. But I thought that that was an incredibly innovative way of applying a tool to to individuals and interaction problem.
I love that. I love that. I wrote a blog a while ago when we were getting to that challenge of broadband and bandwidth issues with people working remotely, that was about the fact that broadband is the new corner office, right? You and I go back long enough where people praise that office space that they got when
Oh
they
yeah.
walked in, right? And if you had the corner office, you made it, right?
Mhm.
And at some point, there was a generation of workers that said, you know what? That's not as important anymore. I value my work-life balance. I value my flexibility. Give me the ability to connect from anywhere, and I will take that any day over a fancy office with a couch in the corner, right?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I know there's a lot of talk about return to office versus hybrid and stuff. Um, I'll tell you right now, I'm with Kevin Leary on this thing. I think hybrid work is here to stay.
Yes.
Honestly, I think hybrid
Yes.
work is here to stay.
Big proponent of that. I think it's one of those competitive advantages that small, mid-sized companies today have over the larger companies that are locked in to their particular type of arrangement that they made prior, that their real estate made.
Yeah,
So very, very much on board with that.
yeah, absolutely.
I want to segue just a little bit and now talk about some of the specifics on the tool. By the way, you alluded to something relating to the access that we would need to have for this information. Access to information was a big deal.
Hmm.
I have a study that was recently released, and it was by the government. Our friends in government are busy in a good way
Hmm.
getting the need to procure getting the need to procure Agile in an effective manner and providing the right guidance in order for that to happen, right? And our friends had some very, very interesting findings. This, by the way, is pertaining to the the GAO, which is the Government Accountability Office. They're the agency for U.S. Government providing audits, evaluation, and so on and so forth. And they created a report that just came out this week, maybe late last week, but in the last few days, for about 320 pages worth of what to look for to know that an organization is going to be doing a good job when it comes to their agile transformation. What are the guidance from the US government in agility? And they presented some of the challenges relating to what the government has seen when it comes to agile adoption. And one of them related to the integration of agile tools being a major one, right? They mentioned tools like Jira in the
Hmm.
report. Not that Jira is a problem, but that was one of the examples they used as an agile tool being used. And visibility, transparency, availability to the information, and access was a major hurdle. Now, I'm connecting that to your original comment, Marcelo, where you said, look, back in the days, we used to put stickies up on the wall. I remember on my way to the kitchen for
Hmm.
my daily espresso, I could get a really good idea in terms of where the teams were just by the information radiators that were all over the place.
Yep.
Today, I'm working with a team and they're remote, and all of that information is in Jira somewhere, and I have to go find out number one, what workspace that's in. Number two, what reports I need to look at. Are we looking at the same reports? Does it have the right filters in there? And I end up making one conclusion while you end up making another.
Hmm.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
On my way to the coffee, I can get all of that information. Today, I almost need to have specific training just to be able to
Yeah.
understand it really well.
It's funny.
Please go
It's
ahead.
funny. It's funny you say that because what you could find out back in the day by walking the hallway and looking at a cork board, okay, now to make it possible for someone to be able to set up and manage that could be a class of its own and probably is, okay, because of the volume of information that a team, people don't realize that a team literally interacting with each other generates an immense volume of data, okay, just by their individuals and interactions interacting with the tool. The problem is getting it out and discerning it in such a way that you can make sense of it, okay, and then use it as information to guide your decision making. Okay. People like to talk about KPI, key performance indicators. No, they're key decision informers. Okay. You use the data and the tool to inform your decision making, not to drive you. You don't use the dashboard in your car to drive. You drive and you use the dashboard to inform you what decisions you should take. If you see a needle that's getting close to a letter E somewhere, okay, that's probably an indication you're about to run out of fuel. You keep the decision. But here's the problem, or here's the challenge really, is how do we work with these systems in such a way that these decisions can be informed much more simply, Ernesto? There is the big challenge. And that's the stuff that probably this report is referring to. Why? Because here's the big challenge. We over engineer a lot of these work management systems. Okay. We do an insufficient job of training the people to understand how to set up these systems in such a way that that information is usable to the people who are making decisions. And I'm talking about all the way from the team, all the way to stakeholders, number one. Then further training those people and understanding, well, what am I looking at here? What are these visualizations? What does it mean to see this chart? Okay, so there's training there. And then let me be direct, some additional ongoing support, be it in the coaching, scrum mastering, whatever you want to call that term, to help make it stick, to help reinforce it so that people can use that information to their benefit. Okay, I mean, if we put together a dashboard so that we can see the ready progress of a team in preparing to do work, doing work, delivering work, okay, that's one thing. Tying it back to, for example, dollars and cents, how is that money being spent? That's a different view. Okay, the first view, a team might care more about, okay, what was our plan, how is our plan going, and what have we completed? Great. You're not going to really share that to your CFO, Ernesto. Your CFO, Ernesto, wants to see your monetary burn rate. Okay, your CMO, your chief marketing officer, chief sales officer, okay, they might want to see, okay, what rate of feature delivery are we putting into the customer? Okay, they might care about that sort of stuff. And by the way, do you want to put that in the same sort of dashboard? Probably not.
So let's talk about dashboarding, because I mentioned at the beginning, you and I get the opportunity to work a lot together, and we sort of have a formula that works very well, right?
Mhm.
We over the years have um, gravitated towards certain metrics. And by the way, I love I sort of took that and turned it into a quote, pseudo phrasing or paraphrasing there, key decision indicators over key performance indicators. I love that, right?
Mhm.
And that's what we try to get when we go into an organization and we're trying to align that organization, align the stakeholders. Oftentimes, we go into organizations to
Mhm.
fix one problem. The fact that the development is not aligning with the strategy of the organization, right?
Mhm.
The executives think that the teams are working on one thing and the teams are actually working on another.
Mhm.
Maybe dysfunctional as that may sound, is quite popular, it's quite common for that to
Mhm.
happen. So one of the things we do is we go in and first of all, we align to what that particular structure is, what are going to be the playbooks relating to the Agile structure, its practices, its roles, its events, and so on. We train everyone, and then we help them implement that. And in the
Mhm.
implementation part is where the rubber meets the road. And
Right.
oftentimes folks get behind a keyboard and they say, well, let's have a sprint review. And now we're getting to the sprint review, and they're not sure how to show the product. They're not sure how to tell the story of the sprint to stakeholders. So one of the things we like to align on, and I know I'm putting words in your mouth, Marcelo, but we've done it together, is we like to present a dashboard that is about decision indicators,
Yeah.
things that are going to help individuals align. Tell us a little bit about that.
So think of it this way: whether you're using Scrum as your framework to guide your teams, or something like Kanban, the point is that the organization has some goals, right? There are some outcomes that they're looking for spending some money. Okay, they've created some bets that they're hoping to get some ROI on in some form or another. Okay, and so to create a dashboard, you've got to consider that we're tying the physical stuff that the team is working on a day-to-day basis, okay, and being able to tie it back to these bets that the organization has made on it. Hey, if we implement this particular sales functionality, okay, it's going to enable our customers back at, for example, I'll use one customer of ours as an example, their customer back at the dealership, to create better deals with their customers coming in the door. Okay, so by making it possible to visualize how what the developers are working on to the strategic outcomes, guess who it helps? Not just the leadership make better decisions as to how it's going, but it also helps inform those who are going to interact with their customers on what the feature benefits of what's actually being developed by the teams. Okay, also because of it involves money, taking that same information, displaying it a different way, putting it in terms that your chief accounting officer, for example, okay, can close the books on a monthly basis, can keep track of this product is being spent this much money at this particular rate. Okay. And then guess what? The CIO, the CEO, the CFO can look at that expenditure and say, well, we're producing this many features. It's costing us this much. We've got this many other features that we want to deliver. Here's how much money I might need from you, Mr. Ms. CFO. Okay.
I love that because it's speaking to different audiences of the stakeholders, right? You brought in the
Absolutely.
CFO. Let's go over some of those particular items that we tend to
Mhm.
include. I'll mention just a few very quickly for those that are interested in the details, right? You are listening and you're looking for, hey, I want to create a dashboard. What are the things I need to look for? So I'll tell you that we always start with the basics. Who's on the team?
Yeah.
You'll be surprised how often people don't know who is on that particular Scrum team if you're working in Scrum, or who are the individuals involved. So you want to make sure that you list those in a very clear way. What is your product goal? What is your vision? How often do we ask individuals what the vision or product goals are, and they don't know? They're just
Right.
working one user story at a time. We need to align that to the strategy. So
Yeah.
we need to understand the vision. We need to understand the product
Yeah.
goal. So right there, centered in a
See,
single concise block of
that's
information, we're able to consume that in just a couple of quick
mhm.
sentences, right?
See, that's one of the things that ties back into the psychology of teams. Okay. One of the easiest ways to lose your team members and have them feel de-incentivized is disconnecting them from the why. The product vision, the product goal that you're shooting for, okay, the sprint goal if you're using Scrum as a framework for this particular sprint, okay, it helps to understand why. Why are we working on this set of stuff? Okay, and why is it important? Why does it matter? Okay, it seems kind of silly if you think about it. It's like it's almost obvious, but the fact is that loss of that motivating factor contributes to demotivation. Okay, but the better the teams understand, especially as you get into a multi-team environment. Okay, if you're applying, Scrum at scale, for example. Okay, you've got a lot of teams who are trying to coordinate with each other and navigating their part of the product goal, okay, at any given time, okay, and to understand what each part of their objective for meeting that product goal is. Okay, team A understands what team B is working on for with regards to that goal. Guess what? they're better able to pivot to help each other, okay, as they're working together to reach that product goal. Okay? This is key. This is key stuff. And it's a no-brainer, Ernesto. It's a
I
no.
love that. Um, I would say you can continue on that path because you can not only communicate the why, you can track the why.
Yeah.
We can track how well we are achieving the product goal. So that's one of the things that we'd like to include in that infamous dashboard, right?
Mhm.
Is what are the things that are supporting the product goal? So now we're moving into the actual, whether you're working with initiatives, whether you're working with features, whether you're working with epics, whether you're working with user stories. Most organizations work with all of the ones I mentioned. I
Yeah.
just answered a question that we also often have. What's your preferred team composition from a work structure? So if you have those, connect them to your product goal, connect them to your vision, and show that. Let
Yeah.
me see, give me transparency into your actual product backlog and demonstrate the execution of those items in
Yeah.
filling the cup toward the
Yeah.
product goal.
The thing is that there's a challenge of balance, okay? Because if you put too much information in front of the team, any given team, okay, it tends to distract them, okay? So the view of how you prepare things for the teams, okay, is also incredibly important. Okay, one of the things that we spend a fair bit of time is creating those different views, Ernesto, so that the teams can apply focus to the things that matter most to them right now. Do we want our developers trampling through the product backlog, looking at an initiative that may not come for several months? No, we don't want them wasting their time there. Okay, not that they aren't, it's not okay for them to look at it, but we want to help them focus on what is our goal for this, brief period of time, for example. All right. And when you've got this product backlog where everything is all jumbled together and you've got 5,000 items and no easy way of sorting or making sense of it, that that kills products. That kills companies, Ernesto. Okay? So even if you've got a ton of stuff that's going to comprise what this product is, being able to partition it and view it in a structure that helps people focus for the type of conversation that they're having near, now, soon, later is incredibly important. Okay. And that applies to Azure DevOps, it applies to Jira. And I cannot tell you the number of times where we've gone in and work with a client and it's one great big mishmash. Okay. It's one huge thing. There's no discerning, the real structure. It's all in one place, and the only thing the team knows is, I have to look at this because if I look down here, I'm lost now.
And that's it.
And
The
that's
amount of information can become a distraction, right?
correct.
So everything that we do, we try to keep it at no more than eight, no more. It could be less, but no more than 8 of those little boxes, just showing us what's important. And when we talk about the backlog, we want the prioritized top items. We're not talking about going down to item number 200 or 300. In fact, backlogs should probably not have that many anyway.
Yeah.
So completely agree. And you also mentioned a couple of tools. By the way, I just want to finish on some of those modules. Sprint burn down, I have no problem including the burn down. I love a burn down. I always use a burn down. Going on the record, anybody who's got a problem with the burn down, I get it. You might like a burn up. You might like a different thing. I like
Mhm.
seeing my burn down in terms of the forensics for the sprint, right? It works.
For instance, for the sprint is always useful. It's put it this way: you may not use the tachometer, but if you hear the engine acting funny and you see the thing at a red indicator, you might want to take your foot off the pedal. I'm just saying, okay?
And you talk
So
about feeding the pedal, you're alluding to velocity, right? When
yeah,
we use
yeah.
it in the
So
form of understanding how we're burning toward a particular release,
correct.
and our velocity is also useful.
So in that respect, there are other visual indicators that are also useful to the team. For example, visualizing things in the sense from how long has something been sitting there. In other words, yes, we may have a daily meeting, Okay, a daily scrum if you're using Scrum, a Kanban meeting if you're using Kanban. Okay, but the thing is this: another thing that kills teams is if you're not able to visualize how long has this been sitting there, Ernesto. I mean, think of it this way: when you go to a grocery store to get some vegetables, what do you want? You want the freshest vegetables. You don't want a vegetable that's been sitting there for a week. Why? Because it's probably not going to be as tasty. So that there's a cost to that. There's even there's thing called cost of delay. So you want to be able to track the delay from when you decided that this mattered to you and actually completing it. It matters. So we track how long things take, and it's useful to know how long has it been sitting there. Okay. So you can see that in two different ways. You can use that visualizing the cycle time, which comes, in Jira to some degree, also in Azure DevOps via extensions. The thing is this that both of these systems, when they come out of the box, they're very basic, very bare bones. And there's some extensions that we recommend to our customers to say, you know what, some of these are free, some of them are going to cost you a little bit of money. Okay. But think of it this way: it's going to save you time not having to download data, pump them through Excel spreadsheets. Oh my God, my math on my Excel spreadsheet was wrong. Okay. And now your data is skewed. Okay.
So let's talk about that for a bit. You mentioned the word extension or
Yeah.
plugins, depending on which tool you're using.
Mhm.
And we make extensive use of some of those depending on what we need.
Yep.
One of the key ones that we recently used together, Marcelo, was in Azure DevOps,
Mhm.
a retrospective that comes built into Microsoft. Very basic, but it
Yep.
does allow us to get a sentiment at the end of every retrospective for all of the teams in this implementation that we just worked on, which was a Scrum at Scale. There were quite the amount of teams, and we wanted to keep a reading in terms of how the team engagement was going, and that extension
Yep.
helped a lot. But not the best one, not the most insightful one when it comes
Right.
to the amount of features. Tell us, give us your perspective on that.
Well, my perspective, it's a good start. Okay. It's a good start. It gives you. It's called, by the way, it's called retrospectives. Wow, a really fancy name. Um, and it has some extra capabilities beyond the stop, start, continue. A retrospective, you can add extra columns. It has a few different formats to it. Okay, so your teams don't feel like they're in the same gyration again, over and over. But speaking to that team sentiment, okay, very useful so that your team over time, okay, can get a sense for itself as to because especially if you put together a team, if you think about the Tuckman model of team development, some people agree with it, some people don't, but if you do, forming, storming, norming, performing. Okay, as the team works together using that team sentiment, you can help them visualize where they are with their own team development. Okay, this applies whether you're using Scrum or not. Okay, you could be running something else, but seeing that team sentiment, okay, helps the team get a sense for itself. Okay, it enables them to have a conversation if this particular iteration or period of time, because the retrospective tools can be run at any time. It doesn't have to be on a sprint by sprint basis. You could run a weekly retrospective if you want. You could run a monthly retrospective if you want. Okay. It's a whenever you want sort of thing. It's not coupled to your sprints. Okay. But it
So
enables you to have that conversation when and how you need to. Another thing that's also good for it. Let's say your team decides they want to undertake a Kaizen. They realize, you know what, we're not splitting our work items enough, Ernesto. This thing was just too huge. Okay. Yes, we were able to finish it by the end of the sprint, but my God, did our energy take a nosedive on the team assessment? Everything was okay except that team energy. Okay. It was down in the red. Okay. Let's have a conversation. What do we want to do? Guess what? If the team decides they want to implement a Kaizen from that retrospective, okay, Now you can to a work item that can go into the backlog of work for this next period of time, whether you're using Kanban, whether you're using Scrum, it's there. It's part of the task board that the team is using. Okay, so they don't forget what they agreed to improve about themselves. And guess what? Over time, that also generates dividends back to management so that they can, because they'll say, oh, well, I want to know how this team is maturing. Let's look at the number of team improvements that they have self-chosen to undertake and have achieved. Okay? Think about that as a metric. The number of Kaizens a team has undertaken over time, okay? And if you can tie it back to the benefits of what outcomes it's helped drive, okay, why do you need to use these, agile maturity assessments? You got palpable benefits right there, and it's quantifiable.
And now we've got full circle, right? One of the blocks out of those 8 that I mentioned that we always make sure it's in there. This is first class citizen is what is your Kaizen item for your sprint? And there should only be a handful in there because we coach around getting teams to choose one item that they're going to work on in the very next sprint. That way they're not overcommitting to doing a bunch of things and nothing happens, right? And hey, let's create transparency around that so that you remain focused. Right?
I'm not going to apologize it. You and I are both Scrum folks. Okay, we're also Kanban people, but we're Scrum folks. Okay, here's the thing about Kaizens: it doesn't matter what you're working with. Framework, no framework, everybody can benefit from improvement.
I love that.
And the fact that you can leverage this as an extension that's free, okay, and tie it back to your task board, okay, and then later on quantify this stuff in a dashboard to management is powerful. Okay, it's powerful, especially if those Kaizens you can tie them back to product goals. That's an incredible message. Okay, that's an incredible message.
As we come more closer to the end, Marcelo, I am just grabbing these nuggets that are surfacing here, right? So select the Kaizen and work on it because everyone can benefit from improvement. That's an absolute. The idea that sometimes it's difficult to have these Kaizen events or these work group exercises in a remote setting, right? How do we collaborate? Workshops, how do we do these things? What tools do you prefer? And I've got a few favorites of my own, but want to sort of get your feel on. It's very difficult to have a Kaizen workshop using Jira, for example, right? So what do you use?
Yeah, it is without data. Okay, so I'm going to open up my toolbox and I'm going to throw some freebies at the listeners who stayed with us this long and have been so patient. Okay, for example, one of the tools that I really like is something called Actionable Agile. It's a flow-oriented extension that plugin for Jira, an extension for Azure DevOps. Okay, that regardless of what process template you're using, okay, can track things like cycle time, okay, for your work items. It can display back how long these. Remember how I was talking about earlier about how fresh is it? How long is how long has that story been sitting on the shelf? Well, with that plugin, with Actionable Agile, you can see that. There are some other ones out there that show the same visualization. I happen to like that one a lot myself personally. I've used it for several years. Okay. You can use that to assess, your, how long, okay. For example, give you an idea, and this is just forecasting, how long a feature might take to do in light of other features that are a part of that product goals feature set. Okay. And it's always useful to tie that into how did we do this particular sprint, being able to visualize that cycle time, being able to visualize how the flow of our work is from coming in to being ready, in the plan, being developed, done. Okay. And being able to see that progression of your progress is incredibly motivating to the teams. Okay.
Motivating to the teams. And we got a
Yeah.
question, Marcelo, that I'll read it for um, us to interpret it together. How does one use money to affect change as a
Ah,
Scrum Master? And then
I,
there's a second part to that.
yeah.
Using money, how does a Scrum Master accomplish this?
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a capex opex sort of question. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this involves a little bit of collaboration between your product owner and your HR folks and your chief accounting officer or your comptroller. Okay, because to understand your product burn rate, because you start with some sort of budget, okay, and your team costs you money regardless of whether they're sitting idle or they're actually working on something. It's costing you money. Okay, so the idea of capex opex, okay, which is, by the way, according to general accounting, rules and stuff. There's accounting rules in the United States, international accounting rules to account for capitalizable work and operational costs. Okay, and you can build things inside of your system, either Jira or Azure DevOps, that allow you to categorize. And there's rules around what you can and cannot categorize as capex, capitalizable, or operational cost. There are actual rules around that. Okay. And you can use those rules to build that into your backlog system. Okay. So that when the team completes an item, it's categorized as capex or opex according to those rules. Now, however frequently you process your billing, whether it's a sprint or a month, okay, depending on what your cycle is, you can extract that information that shows you how many things were capex, how many things were opex. Okay, your project manager or someone, or your product owner, if they have that information, okay, can turn around and, with the cost of the team per period of time, turn around and impute, hey, this feature cost us this much money to make. Okay, this bug cost us this much money to fix. Okay, and with that information, your Scrum Master can help your product owner and team make better decisions on, do we spend more money dealing with our technical debt? Oh, shoot, our bugs are really expensive. Why? Because we're producing a lot of technical debt. We might want to work on our technical debt, folks. Bring that down so that the number of defects come down, so the cost of fixing things comes down, so that we can raise the amount of money that we can spend on capitalizable work. The stuff that actually makes the money to keep the doors open. That's the money right there. So
And
that's
to
kind of like a 10,000-foot view. Hopefully, I've kind of given the LinkedIn users a couple of ideas to think about.
I think you are giving them a lot, because that's sort of a very, very sought out strategy. How do we maximize one over the other from
Yeah.
an account purposes? And
Oh.
in that question, I also read a little bit about motivation. I'm reading into how do we motivate individuals, and it's worth mentioning. This is not tools related, but rather around intrinsic motivators, something that's very important, right? The discovery through research that individuals are not necessarily motivated by monetary compensation as much as they are by intrinsic motivators, at least for knowledge workers, for the most part, right? This idea of the why. We've come back to the beginning where we mentioned make sure that you're communicating why we're doing this, what's important, why this is valuable, so that there is a greater reason other than the extrinsic reward that you will get out of it. So, according to Daniel Pink, Drive, the intrinsic motivators for knowledge workers include autonomy, giving individuals or individuals gaining more autonomy over how they work. It's extremely motivating. Giving individuals the ability to improve or master what they're doing. We all want that. Is where things like open source come into play. We want to contribute to a larger community in a way that improves and shows our mastery. That's very motivating. And of course, the last and the one that I started with being the purpose. What is the purpose for doing this? If I have a purpose, if you are giving me a vision that I am buying and getting behind, I'm going to be extremely motivated. So there are those things that allow us to be very, very motivated and are outside of the scope of monetary reward. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know, absolutely. And I'll go you one further. A happy team is a productive team. Very simple. A happy team is a productive team. Okay. I mean, yeah, barring that I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. A happy team is a generally productive team. So, that's something that always. And I'll tell you this right now. Given what I've heard from developers over the year, okay, setting up a work tooling system for them that is hostile, I'll say it that way, hostile, okay, is not conducive to a happy team. Which brings us again, how do tools help agility? Okay, yes, there's certain circumstances where, for example, if you're in a heavily regulated environment, you need to generate an abundance of artifacts, okay, for regulatory compliance and stuff like that. Okay, I'm going to respect that for a moment, but if by and large you don't have that internal and external constraint, okay, what you and I have seen, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot, as much as I have, if not more, that you tend to over-engineer that work management system so that developers have to fill out 17 different fields. Okay. And what developer do you know that wants to fill out 17 fields just to be able to close a product backlog item?
And you use the word, I think you're being generous when you said over engineer. You mean over process it.
Well, I'm talking about somebody was a process engineer, and I'm being kind by saying that. Somebody was a process engineer that put together that template for work items, those templates for process workflows, okay, where we have 18 different stages to get something where it's not even necessarily deployed.
And to add to that, then what you have is a frustrated Scrum Master because they're always coming to the table saying, hey, teams, why aren't you updating the artifacts? Well, it takes half an hour per item of update. So
yeah,
I will do that at the end of the day, and then I don't because I moved on to other things, and now we've got a bigger problem.
I'll go you one further, and I'm going to use your example. Developer did their thing, may have checked in a change set, okay, but there needed to be some information that they needed to provide another team member who needed to review it. I'll give you an example. I did this work several hours ago, but I went over to work on some other thing and I didn't update this item inside of the backlog. What was it again that I did, Ernesto? What am I going to Oh, hang on a second. And then you spend a half an hour trying to remember what you needed to leave for that team member who's going to do your review because they're working on something else at the moment. I mean, let's say, yeah, we could talk about, teams swarming together or mobbing together, but in this case, let's say they weren't. Okay. You just spent a half an hour trying to remember what would have taken you 10 seconds, maybe a minute to write. Okay. And on top of that, you're now feeling frustrated because it took you a half an hour to remember what you wrote. Okay. And then third, and probably the most important one, did you remember everything that you needed to tell that other team member so that when they show up, they have the right picture?
So I want to give you a something to chew on that I found interesting, right? So the 2023 State of Agile report had a segment on the tool penetration. or tool adoption, right? Look at it from different perspective. Is how much usage are these tools getting, or who is using what? And I promise you, I make no money on any of these tools. I'm just being transparent. Jira came up on top, right? Jira 66%. No
Not
surprise there.
surprising.
Mural and Miro combined, let's call them whiteboard collaboration or real-time collaboration tools, had a 42% penetration.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. 42% of Agile team members out there are using these whiteboard collaboration tools. That is a massive number. And I mentioned before that I'll confess one of my favorites. I love the use of these white collaboration tools, like Miro, for example. Miro doesn't even know I exist, so this is completely throwing them a free endorsement here. Miro, by the way, is also great at doing this, and I love it for their flexibility. When all of these tools are getting in the way of us doing it the way we want to, I go to a white collaboration tool. I go to a Miro board and I start throwing stuff in there and getting the teams to collaborate, whether that is a dashboard that has screenshots or a connection back to Jira, or whether that is a set of swim lanes that is going to allow us to look at impediments in a more visual way. Whatever that is, I started there. I worry about the tool fanciness later. So I love that.
Oh man, you're making me open the toolbox again, Ernesto. Back in the day when we didn't have Azure DevOps, but it was called Team Foundation Server, and we were first using Scrum. Okay, you had to create your process template, your workflow, design your work items, but we didn't have no fancy schmancy visual designer like you have in Azure DevOps now. You had to code what your process was going to look like, what your work items were going to look like in XML. You had to type it in XML. So I went back to my IBM days with that corkboard, a 3x5, and a push pin. I said, you know what? I'm going to draw these on a whiteboard, and once I get my design organized and I have it reviewed by my team members, and they have a shared understanding of this is how we're going to work together, then I set apart to start to code it so that things were the way we agreed to do it. Okay. So one of the things that I like to do, that I will do with our clients, is, okay, you've got your structure. Great. Let's look at it visually. Okay. Let's look at it visually outside of the tool itself. Okay. As if we were doing it analog. We take it where, what's the millennial phrase? OG. We go OG on it. Original gangsta. Okay, we go OG on it and go visual. And for that, we jump into Mural. We jump into Miro. We grab some good old-fashioned stickies. We design swim lanes. Okay, we talk about how are we going to represent impediments? How do we want to visualize impediments? Okay, and we start from the analog and then work our way back to the digital. And in this case, the analog is digital, but it's visually representing an analog metaphor. Okay?
How often do we think we know what we want until we see it, and then we're able to improve it because we saw it, right? Often
Absolutely.
we throw it up on the board and we say, you know what, actually, I don't like how that works. Why don't we put this on it? And just that flexibility allows us to come up with the better version of what we thought we wanted, and then we can bring that into a more curated tool or implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other nice thing about it is that just like with that cork board and the 3x5 cards and push pin, if you don't like how those columns or how those swim lanes or the design of that work item, or if you don't like how that workflow is, you change it there. Just like if you're doing it in a whiteboard. Just like if you're doing it with stickies.
I love that.
You pick it up and you manipulate it right then and there, and you can stand back about it. And here's the other nice thing, and I don't know how many people think about this. There is an incredible copy paste. It's fine. Leave the design we have now, copy it, paste it, touch up the one that you want, you're thinking could be better, and now you've got both. Okay, you couldn't do. Let me put it this way. I'll tell you right now, you try doing that in Jira, you'll want to have a drink at the end of the day, maybe even before the end of the day. Maybe even before
I
the end of
love
the day.
that.
Okay.
We hit the 1 hour marker, Marcelo. I do want to address one question before we leave. There was a question that was very, very short, and that is, what tools are you currently using? And that's a hard question to answer, right? Because we go
How much
through
time do you
all of
have?
it. I will say this. I will say this. I love that question because there was a time when we could afford to provide the following. I myself engaged in many initiatives and said, look, I am an agile coach. I'm going to come in, I'm going to help you with your transformation, but we are tool agnostic. The tool is your thing. What you do there, that's you. We can't do that anymore. Every
Yeah.
engagement we have has an element of tooling, because if the tool is not in place, it becomes very difficult for us to get the results, right?
It's the thing that I drive home in our Scrum at Scale training. Look, for better for worse, we're working in a distributed world now, Ernesto. Really, we're working in a distributed world. We have to get used to the fact that we're working in a distributed world. Our tools have to be fit for purpose for distributed individuals and interactions. I don't know if I coined a new phrase for a new manifesto. I don't want Alistair Coburn and Uncle Bob to come after me. Please, Jim Highsmith, if you're listening, don't be mad at me. Okay. But we need our assistants to promote distributed individuals and interactions. Okay. So obviously I've mentioned them before, Mural extensively. The work management tools that I've mentioned as well. The extensions like retrospective, actionable agile, the analytics extensions inside of Azure DevOps. If you want similarly for Jira, get yourself the Great Gadgets extension. I'm giving away the farm here with some of these things.
There's one you haven't mentioned, Marcelo, that everyone uses and everyone is familiar with: Excel.
Oh yeah,
I'm making
absolutely.
a dramatic pause there because you would normally say, well, Ernesto, Excel is not an agile tool. It's not, it shouldn't be used by agile tools. What if I told you that that same report, that State of Agile report, has the Excel adoption for agile teams at 34%?
Mhm.
34% of agile teams are using Excel for their product backlog management. That
Yeah.
is incredibly surprising to me, but true.
Yep. But it's put it this way: there's something to be said for ubiquity. It's low. It's especially low impedance if you have low. I'm going to say it this way: low ceremony necessary. Okay. If you have low ceremony necessary, Excel is perfectly acceptable. Okay. I mean, yeah, to keep historical information, that's probably not the way you're going to go. It's incredibly poor for keeping historical information. I'm just going to say that right then and there. Okay. It does not keep a history of change within it. Okay.
Yeah, and we got a comment. I banned Excel within my teams. There
Hey.
is an element of governance, of culture, of guidance
Yep.
that also is important in all of this. So some
Mhm.
don't get me wrong. I am not advocating the use of Excel for project
Yes,
management
please.
for purposes of managing use.
Can we
Um,
not go back to 1999? Thank you.
yeah, it's just incredibly surprising to me to see this number still be this high for adoption
It
of
it does
tools in an agile team. Yeah.
it doesn't surprise me for several reasons. Again, probably because the ubiquity, probably also because we do have a lot of project managers out there lurking around. You know who you are, okay, who are still accustomed to doing it that way. God bless them, that they're still accustomed to doing that way. If it's working for them, and if the team is finding utility out of the fact that this person is using Excel, then more power to them. Again, with the caveat that if you need benefit of historical information, Excel's probably not your choice.
And here's another surprise, last one. On the opposite end of that, Trello. at 1% adoption. I was
Yeah.
surprised to see Trello be that low.
Um,
It's a tool that is very, very no frills. You can start using Trello in the first 5 minutes for free. It, of course, lacks a significant amount of features, and including swim lanes and other things that you have to do through Power Ups. No metrics, unless, again, you go the extra mile to try to extract that. Very much about, hey, let's just get something quick and dirty
yeah.
going. I would have expected to see a higher
Mm,
adoption for
It,
those no frill teams that are out there, right?
it doesn't surprise me. Okay, it doesn't surprise me, and I'll tell you why. Okay, it's because of what you described at the very beginning of this live stream. Remember that big terrible lizard that we mispronounced and called Jira? Guess what? Guess who owns Trello? Atlassian bought Trello back in 2018, if memory serves, and has slowly been integrating Trello functionality into the base Jira product. Okay. If you're a Jira user and your organization hasn't turned it off, you might find yourself something called Jira Next Gen Projects. Okay. That's Atlassian's approach to integrating the feature function set of Trello into the Jira base product. Okay. It looks like Jira, but it behaves like Trello. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. People who are Trello diehards, they're probably going to have their Trello account when they're being lowered into the grave. There are those folks out there. Okay, there are folks who are never going to give up Trello. So I give them props because well, in the past also a Trello user. So I don't blame them one doggone bit. It's
So,
still very good. It's a step above Excel. I'll give them that.
and that's why I was surprised to see one over the other. That's exactly why I thought, wow, that's a high number for Excel. And then I thought, wow, that's a really low number for Trello. And that's why I love data, because sometimes it challenges what you would have assumed otherwise.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. So I want to say something though, Ernesto. With all this talk of tools, okay, I want to circle back to why I wanted to come on this live stream. Okay, is to we know that individuals and interactions are the things that are most valuable. Okay, but I cannot overemphasize, especially working how we are today, the things that we choose to do the job that we need to do need to be fit for purpose to help us. We have to think carefully about the tools that we use. Okay. We have to give it some thought.
and I love that as a closing message. I like to recap with a couple of key takeaways. There's been so much in here, and in itself, that's my imparting takeaway.
Mhm.
This is a very, very deep subject with a lot of tentacles. It requires our attention. It requires new expertise. It requires us to consider that for fit purpose. It is
Mhm.
not something that happens accidentally. It is not something that we're going to stumble on the knowledge. You need to budget appropriately. You need to learn it appropriately. You need to plan it appropriately. You need to make sure that it's fit for your team and for your organization. I do believe that there's plenty of material here. We haven't even scratched the surface. We haven't talked about the how to do this and where you click and how you implement a lot of the
Yeah.
things that we've done. So I do think that there's quite a bit more for us to cover. We'll likely have other sessions, and
Yeah.
perhaps even there's a class in the making, Marcelo, where
Yeah.
individuals can do this together with us in a way that we can walk them through how
Yeah.
we have done it with
Yeah.
other engagements, right?
Yeah. Because the fact is that even if you're not a scrum master, understanding what makes a good work environment for me, not development environment, but a good work environment. Okay. And what makes a good tool set? Okay. Do I have this screwdriver or that screwdriver? And why am I choosing this screwdriver over that screwdriver for the type of work that I'm doing? Okay. And if you've been given a screwdriver, you may need to think about, how do I make the case that, by the way, we've been using this screwdriver, but the fact is that what we need is a hammer. Okay, because I'm using this screwdriver to drive in nails. I know I'm flipping the if everything you see is a hammer, then everything is a nail metaphor on its head. But the fact is, there are times, and it's more often than people would care to admit, there are often times we're just literally using the wrong tool for whatever reason, and it's hampering our individuals and interactions. Just
I
saying.
love that. And
Just
that leads into, look, we have to remember, Agile is about adaptability and continuous improvement.
Yep.
Meeting individuals where they are, inspecting how that worked for us, and adapting based on what we are observing. That makes us agile. That keeps us agile. So remember that, right? So with that, I think that's a great opportunity for us to close here. We've gone significantly into various aspects of this discussion, where your questions took us, where Marcelo's expertise took us, where the industry is today. It's a topic for us to continue to provide more insight as much as we are able to learn from what we're observing from you out there. So stay agile, and hope that you join us in our next session. Thank you very much, Marcelo.
peace, everybody. Thanks
Be
for
well.
having me, Ernesto.